Welcome to Madame Raven's. This way to the library. She's been expecting you.
The Hangman by Scaredy Cat 666. I just fell into bed, face first. After a 5-hour trip, I was way too tired to unpack my things or anything like that. This house on the edge of a small town is the place where I was supposed to stay for the next year. A few moments before, I was walking around the furniture-less living room and huge adjacent white kitchen with the floor-to-ceiling windows, trying to get used to the place, to imagine what it would be like to live here, but I failed. My body began to ache. No more energy to ponder, to get settled, to install myself. Just the unrelenting desire to lay there motionless and unconscious. Trying to fall asleep, shreds of thoughts rushed through my mind. My family inherited this house a month ago from my weird uncle. I always wanted to do a student exchange, and the college in this town looked just awesome. So since no one of my family wanted to live here, and selling the house wasn't a priority, it was just a practical decision for me to stay here for the coming 2 semesters. Now, what do I mean when I say weird uncle? Well, there's a lot I could tell you about my uncle. Not firsthand, though, since my uncle liked to keep to himself and rarely showed up to family gatherings. I only remember seeing him like 4 or 5 times, so all I knew consisted of rumor and old family anecdotes. But there's a bunch of those. I could tell you how he was interested in occult stuff and the paranormal, how he wrote several books about those topics, how he was a member of several cults, how he was repeatedly hospitalized on account of severe schizophrenia, and how my mother cried when she spoke of him. But the weirdest thing about him was not how he lived, but how he vanished. For my uncle did not die, not that we know of. He just disappeared. The reason we inherited his house was that after 2 years he was declared legally dead. My family, for the most part, has had enough time to mourn and move on. Only my mother wasn't quite over it, which nobody blamed her for. He was her brother after all. Anyhow, here I was trying to doze off in this huge empty house. Even though I was really tired, I couldn't fall asleep. Was it because I felt uneasy in this house, due to the aforementioned circumstances? Or was it just the fact that I always have had trouble sleeping in new places? I tried to shove aside any unsettling thoughts and sleep. I was lucky as the wind was blowing through the trees outside. This has always had a calming effect on me. The whispering of the branches, the rustling of the weeds and bushes, all kinds of flowing and crackling frequencies. An owl in the far distance. So relaxing. But there was something else. Inconspicuous at first, but the more I focused my attention on it, in which I have no choice, the louder it got. It was some sort of periodic, petty small sound which broke the wonderful, softly floating chaos of the night. I tried to ignore it, but I couldn't. It sounded like a creaking, a heavy old wood creaking. Who cares? I just want to sleep Stop thinking about the weird sound and focus on the nice, sweet... damn it. I couldn't ignore it anymore. Even though my body was crying from exhaustion, I had no choice but to get up and check what it was. Maybe there was an easy way to make it stop. I lifted my aching body out of the horizontal position, went to the window and opened the blinds. As I saw the source of the sound, my heart stopped. I screamed violently and fell backwards onto the floor before I could even consciously compute what I saw. For there, in the backyard, was a man hanging from the old tree, swaying in the wind. Within a millisecond, I was more awake than I have ever been in my life. I couldn't see the man's face, just his dark figure levitating outside my window, staring down at me. In thunderous panic, I got up and ran outside my room and into the kitchen from where I could access the backyard. While I was on my way, I was able to formulate some thoughts. The man needs help. I need to get him down. I must call the paramedics. I ran past my phone. No time. Get him down first. I picked up a stool from the kitchen with one hand, tore open the glass door to the backyard with the other, and ran outside. It took me several seconds to realize the man wasn't there anymore. Confused, I stumbled around the yard, shaking, breathing heavily, and not knowing what to do next. Maybe he fell down and is lying somewhere, I thought. I walked around looking in every corner, behind every little bush and in the small backyard. The stool still clutched in my hands. I peeked into my neighbor's yard and saw nothing. I called out, "Hello?" The sound of my own voice sent a shiver through my spine. It made the whole situation more real. Nothing. I stopped. As I tried to catch my breath, I looked at the old tree. It wasn't very tall, but dark and evil looking. Even though it was almost summer, it only bore a few leaves. It looked like a mean old creature towering over me. Its branches like the legs of a spider or the fingers of a witch, reaching out in every direction. It felt like it was watching me, like it saw me as an intruder. A gust of wind blew through the yard, making the grass move and cooling my head. Maybe I should go back inside, I thought. I turned my gaze towards the house. I could see the kitchen through the huge windows. It was dark with some shapes standing there. Furniture, a vase, a bread basket. Suddenly, a humanoid, shadowy figure moved out of the darkness, across the room and out of my sight. I jumped. Oh, he's inside the house. Slowly, I started walking towards the glass door, my heart pounding. I entered with the stool clutched tightly in my hands and raised above my head, ready to strike down whomever I had planned to save only a moment ago. I turned on the light. Everything was quiet. I walked through the hallway, into the living room. I checked everywhere. The closets, the bathroom, behind every curtain, and even under my bed. There was no one there. It was just my imagination, but it felt so real. Should I still call the police? I went back to the kitchen. I set down the stool, standing there completely out of tune and with an empty mind, not knowing what to do or think next. I turned my head, and there on the fridge, a weird occult symbol was painted in red. It consisted of 2 overlapping circles and some strange signs. Below, some words were written in the same red paint. It said, "My house." I stood there for a second. No time for any reaction when all of a sudden, something grabbed me from behind, throwing me on the floor with brute force. It dragged me across the kitchen floor and out into the backyard. I kicked and screamed in panic. Even though I could not see it, I could feel that it must have been as strong as an ox. My hands were bound behind my back. I felt something around my neck choking me. The next moment, I was hoisted up from the ground high into the air, my feet kicking into nothingness. Incredible pain started to swell up through my body. When I came to realize the situation I was in, it was already too late. I was hanging from the tree in my own backyard, slowly suffocating. I felt myself go. This was it. This is how it ends. My vision became blurry. Darkness slowly covered me. The last thing I could see was my bedroom window. Someone was looking out of it. His face was running white with sudden terror. It was me. So quoth this raven. The Demon House of Dermondy Street by Project Nightmare. Ever since I could remember, I've been surrounded by and fascinated with the paranormal. Whether it be a spirit passerby in a haunted house I've lived in, visiting a haunted place for my somewhat successful YouTube channel, or a passed-on family member coming to visit. A lot of my interest came from my father's side of the family, and they are apparently prone to the supernatural. This is one story my paternal grandfather and others told me that is 100% real, some of which I have verified and seen with my own 2 eyes and ears. My grandmother's father had owned a small 3-bedroom, 1-bath house in San Lorenzo, California, ever since my grandmother could remember. It was located on a cul-de-sac named Dermondy Street. It was built in the 1930s and was a quaint little thing. When my grandmother was 15 and her best friend, whom lived just across the street, had started playing with the Parker Brothers Ouija board in the back bedroom. This was 1962, and back then, these were just popular board games, thought to be harmless at the time. Used a magic 8-ball all of the time, if you will. They asked it questions such as, "Who am I going to go to prom with?" or "Does Darren like me?" For a while, nothing would happen, but as they progressed in its use, the Ouija started to answer them. Of course, they just wrote it off as the other girl moving the planchette and laughed it off. Eventually, they stopped using it, however. Whatever was talking to them wanted more attention. Now it's at the point when small things would start to happen. A seemingly disembodied voice here or there. Whispers at night could be heard down the corridor. My great-grandparents had a strange habit of recording their conversations in the living room, probably to reminisce, or for future generations to hear, maybe. But these things could be heard in the background of these recordings. Eventually, things began to escalate. Poltergeist activity, such as things moving or even being thrown off surfaces. My family was scared out of their minds. There's one event in particular that lives in infamy. It was Christmas time of 1963, just a week or so after President Kennedy was assassinated, some of which could still be heard from their black and white RCA television. My great-grandmother was listening to it as she was on a 6-foot-tall stepladder, attempting to decorate the approximately 9-foot-tall Christmas tree they just picked up. As she was trying to place an angel on the top of the tree, she was violently thrown sideways across the room, crashed into the wall and landing on the TV. From then on, they were deathly, almost literally afraid of the house. Things just got worse. They began to fight constantly, which fed this negative entity further. Eventually, crucifixes began to go missing or get upturned, and one in particular, in front of the back bedroom wall in the hallway, where the Ouija board was used, started to actually drip blood. That's when my great-grandparents decided to contact their local priest, who quickly came to bless the house with holy water, sage, and prayers. As soon as the ritual was finished, they felt very uncomfortable, and the next few days decided to abandon the house and lock it up for good. They moved out with all of their possessions, both physical and demonic, inside. Fast forward 40 years or so to around late 2004. My great-grandfather still owned the house on Dermondy Street. My great-grandmother passed away in 1986, and in his old age he gave the deed to my grandmother, the very same who played with the Ouija board. She rented it out to her daughter, my aunt, and her kids, my cousins, since they had been living with her in their house in Union City for pretty much ever, and wanted a change of scenery and their own space. My aunt opened the door for the first time since 1964. The house smelled of must and mold. Dust covered the floors, tables, and appliances. The white 1951 RCA tabletop radio was still playing music in the other back bedroom. Nothing but antiques setting in the darkness. She had heard the stories but didn't care. Within the month, they had quickly refurnished, keeping much of the original items in the house, and made it their home. My grandmother's friend, the one who played with the Ouija, still lived across the street and came to visit periodically. Everything was normal. It was wonderful, actually. This was when I first stepped foot in that house. I was nearly 10 years old, and I felt always the slightest discomfort. I knew the stories. They interested me. I even saw the old dried brown blood on the wall, which ran down from the crucifix that still remained in its place. Besides the knowing and the feeling, all was well. I spent many a day playing outside with my cousins and little brother, on our bikes and drift trikes we had. I even enjoyed listening to the calming sounds of the BART train's loud electric motors whispering away at night, to and from the monorail-esque station right across the huge parking lot that was now just behind the house's backyard. Then one day, not long after my great-grandfather passed away in April 2005, my eldest cousin, Victor, who was almost 14, began to violently vomit outside as we were playing in front of a large, dead oak tree. My aunt just thought it was the flu, and I recall many days he spent inside watching his favorite Star Wars and Harry Potter's movies, and drawing while eating chicken noodle soup and drinking ginger ale. Things got worse, though. He began to become pale. His voice became weak, and energy was drained. My aunt decided to take him to the ER. They ran many blood tests before they found the result. It was cancer. I don't remember what kind, but I do remember They recommended St. Jude's Children's Hospital as the best place for him to be. Once he was admitted there, they found he had 2 other types of cancers as well, within months going from perfectly healthy to 3 cancers. What was going on? He spent the remainder of his days there before passing away on September 24th. My aunt always blamed St. Jude's for not doing enough quick enough, as originally it was not terminal. But I blame something else. To this day, I still feel as if the house did it. I believe that all that dormant negative energy just soaked itself in for 40 years undisturbed, and then let it out in an instant. It did something. I still don't know why it was him, though. As I'm writing this, and I'm not religious at all, but I do recall the story of Moses in Egypt, who was a prophet of God, who rained down terrible curses upon the land until his people were free from slavery. One of them was killing all of the firstborn sons. From my experience with demonic entities, they like to mock the holy, like getting scratched 3 times to mock the Holy Trinity, the Father, the Son, and the Holy Ghost. Could this have been another, more vague mocking, or was it all coincidence? Other things did happen afterwards. Seeing shadows, hearing voices, but they weren't negative in feeling. They were pleasant. I do believe it was Victor, watching over his home and family. Over the years, I found out more about the house. I found a half-burnt TV guide from under the dirt from 1964 that I dug up in the backyard while metal detecting. I figured that at one point my family tried to burn items to rid themselves or please the angry spirit. And my other cousin, Priscilla, and I did manage to locate those recordings my great-grandparents made in the 50s and 60s. We were able to play them on the old tape recorder that was still in the garage. And yes, we heard the voices and whispers. It still haunts me to this day. The last time I visited the house was in 2010. My aunt and cousins ended up moving back into my grandparents' house in Union City to take care of my grandmother, who had a stroke and pretty much became fully disabled. And after my father had committed suicide due to that and other things, I'm still not sure if that could have been related or not to all the happenings in the house, or the long-time dormant negative energy attached to it. But man, was I happy to see that green Dermondy Street sign in the rear view mirror. So close. This Raven. Thank you, my darlings, for coming and listening to me prattle on. A big thank you to all of my new subscribers, all of my old subscribers, and especially to my Patreons, Ermin Case and Darren and Jennifer Doth. If you like this, please hit the little button to let me know. If you didn't, hit the little button to let me know. Leave a comment. I'm always glad to talk with you, my darlings. I'm open to suggestions and criticisms, critiques. If you have not subscribed, please do so and ring the little bell so you know when to come up and see me. And I will talk to you next time, my darlings. Farewell.